All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of the Entrepreneur Journey podcast. I am so pleased to have James Watson with me today. James Watson is the fractional VP of sales at Sales Catapult. We're going to talk a lot about sales, I'm sure, and how to do those effectively. But James, we're going to get into your expertise and your entrepreneur story in just a minute. But if you don't mind telling everybody kind of what you do and around sales.
Okay, yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a fractional VP of sales. My company is Sales Catapult, and I'm licensed with a larger group of VPs of sales that provides a lot of support, kind of like a corporate umbrella called Sales Acceleration. And in terms of what I do is work with small to mid-sized businesses to help them scale their sales and profits. And for example, I just finished working with a company in Orange County where I won the opportunity in a competitive situation to work with them. And what we started out with is doing assessments and then coming up with a mutually agreed upon statement of engagement with timelines and deliverables. And those included building a sales playbook, running the weekly meetings, assisting them with hiring, building a sales playbook from A to Z, an onboarding process for new candidates coming on board with repeatable and predictable processes, and then onboarding for clients as well, so that the reps would get into a routine motion of at least quarterly and more initially when they bring a new client on, to make sure they're taking care of them, make sure they renew, make sure that they're getting upsells from that client, and then once they've built enough trust, referrals. So I just finished up with that, and that's a good example of what I do.
Wow. I sent you a list of questions beforehand, and now all these other questions are forming in my head about what you do. I think it's amazing. It's like sales from front to back, right? Leaving
Correct.
no stone unturned. That like a lot of people think sales and like they're not thinking of the whole front to back, right? They're thinking of that one little piece of the sales call. There's so much more to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then what differentiates what I do and what the organization I'm part of does is that we are not just sales coaches, even though there's an element of sales coaching going on in there. We're not just saying, hey, here's your playbook, go run with it, or coming in and running kind of hypothetical training sessions, which it serves its purpose. One of our strategic alliance partners is Sandler, and another is Dale Carnegie, and then Rain Group. And that's what they do with established teams. What we are hands-on builders that come in and help with building the sales infrastructure, help with hiring, hands-on management, running the weekly meetings, going through pipeline. And I even, unlike some of my peers, get on calls because I like the game, to assist with closings, and then get on calls with clients to get feedback from them as well.
Didn't intend when we first got on to take the call in this direction, but I have one more follow-up question because I'm just interested, right? So, who would be the ideal client for what you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we kind of work with clients and target clients in the SMB space between $1 million and $50 million in annual revenue. But because my background, I have over 30 years of sales and sales leadership experiences. My background is largely in technology, even though I can work with any type of company, because 70-80% of what we do is infrastructure. The rest is understanding the business and then applying management techniques. But working with those types of companies, in that $1 to $50 million range, is really our sweet spot. But because I'm in, a lot of technology groups, I get referrals to a lot of startups, and I actually, I wouldn't say wasted a year, but I spent a year, talking to a lot of really early stage startups that weren't that well funded or maybe weren't funded. And I did a lot of what Sandler refers to as UPC, unpaid consulting. Now, these are potential clients down the line. but there's a point when there's a point when they're ready, and when they're not still in that proof of concept and doing the sales themselves. But what I did is I worked with the VC and then came up with a kind of a starter plan for early stage founders and co-founders. That is, a light version of what I would do in, our phase one sales infrastructure plan, to give them the things they need at a relatively low cost, just at a 10-hour start engagement, so that they can help to get to that level where they would bring in someone like myself.
Yeah. I could continue to go on that path with you, and maybe I'll circle back around, because especially about the startup question, because I know that sales is so key to business. If you could get that piece right, it helps make everything else work, right? Because driving revenue helps you do a lot more things, and sales is vital to that. So
Absolutely. And I've been on a couple, I've had a couple speaking engagements, one where I was a keynote in Tilly Park, Chicago. And my, topic there was business development in the current economy. And, to your point about focusing on sales, a lot of people during, an economy like we have now, when things are tougher and maybe their revenue's gone down, they kind of take their foot off the pedal, which is exactly the opposite of what they should be doing. They need to keep the lights on, currently. So they need to be doing sales, especially if their revenue has dropped. And they need to position themselves, even if it takes a while, to build that pipeline up so they hit the ground running and have speed to market ahead of their competition, because a lot of people are laying back. And it's a little bit counterintuitive to a lot of early stage founders, especially if they haven't exited companies. They really pump the brakes, and when they should be, on the accelerator.
yeah, I can definitely see a lot of logic in that. Now let's get to the main questions, not the main questions, but the questions I love to ask, getting to know you questions, kind of get to know the guest a little bit better, and so the audience can get to know you not just on a business level, but on a more personal level. So, what activities or hobbies do you like to do to kind of sales can be stressful, high pressure. So, are there any activities or hobbies that you like to do to kind of unwind?
Yeah, definitely. I one kind of simple one, but what I do every morning is I've got an Aussie Shepherd Apollo that I'm very close to, and I enjoy walking him in the morning. I usually do that, get that all done, and all the other things that I do, by 8 o'clock in the morning, and then start my work day. The other activities I like to do are skiing, golfing, working out. I played a lot of, sports when I was growing up. And so I've always, been into fitness and, watching my diet. And those are things that really help to relax me. And also just to kind of get on a personal side, and I'm happy to share it with, especially with the group, with the Christian community group. I am unfortunately going through a divorce, and had a lot of stresses, and I found myself drinking too much, and I ended up quitting drinking about 8 months ago. And I've always had, faith as part of my, repertoire, what I do and what I believe in. And I, grew up, and was confirmed in the Lutheran Protestant church. And I always still prayed, but I wasn't, I was kind of going through the motions. But this really, going through what I did, this really brought me back to that. And so going to church on Sundays and, doing meaningful prayers and, trying to live my life that way is very important to me and has been helpful.
Nice. Congrats on the 8 months of sobriety.
Yep. Thank you.
Speaking of playing sports, you had mentioned briefly that you played sports. What sports did you play?
Yeah, so when I was young, I did almost everything, but I played tennis, I played soccer, I swam, and then I was already doing football and martial arts, and then when I got into high school, I really focused on those two things. And I used to kickbox and then became an instructor, at the dojo that I was part of up in the Bay Area, which is where I'm from. And then I played football, through high school and then a couple years of college. And so, a lot of what I learned and the challenges there and the adversity, are things that, when I started working in the sales world that I didn't even realize, but I really was bringing those to the table. And then when it got to, after a long time of that and working in, for several companies and one for 18 years, that's when I decided to go out on my own and form my own sales consulting company. And what I like to bring to the table and what is very gratifying for me is helping out these small, mid-sized businesses that don't even know that it's an option to have someone with experience and that can bring all that to the table and the processes that I have, through and support from sales acceleration to the table, at a very reasonable price when they don't think they're ready for that. And that's that's one of the keys. You'd asked the question earlier, what's the ideal client? Ideal client is someone that understands that they need help, is willing to accept help, and then is coachable. Sometimes I've forgotten the coachable as I build things up, which a lot of people do, and just deal with it. But those are important things. And then there's latent needs out there, people that don't know it yet, but I'll add them into my monthly newsletter and kind of stay in touch with them without consuming too much time, because there will come a point when they realize that they need help.
Yeah, that's a very key point from you're talking to a marketing person here. So I keeping in your client's head, right? Staying top of mind. If you just let it go at one sales call, no, they're not ready, and then you never follow up, that's a big leaky bucket in a lot of businesses.
Right. And to
So,
that point, sales and marketing, a lot of people, they kind of put everything into buckets, from HR to sales to marketing to their CTO to HR. And one thing I, learned over time and working with corporations and small companies, mid-sized companies, and then one of the companies I work with, there was an outside sales consultant. This is kind of what inspired me to go into consulting. He was more of a generalist, and he, really liked working with me. And he said, I could have really used you in sales specific
mm,
scenarios. But what I learned from him as a generalist is how critical it is to have, to get to know everyone in the different divisions. And sales and marketing really go hand in hand and should be connected at the hip. The other areas of, channels within a company are important, but really doing cross-team collaboration on a routine basis is critical. And that's something that I, have brought into my, consulting, repertoire. And that consultant that I work with, we both were there during COVID, and then a lot of his gig ended, and then I was furloughed, but they kept me on long enough so that my options could vest, because they liked what I had done and said, this is of no fault of yours. But that individual consultant then brought me into my first full-blown sales consulting assignment with the South Korean AI company.
wow,
And I worked for them for about 8 months. And that really inspired me then to start my own company and do what I do now.
nice, nice. Um, this is gonna. Well, I'm gonna before I get to this other question. How do you balance work and personal life currently?
Yeah, so for me, a lot of that is prioritization. And I'm big on lists, and I need to have them. And so I create, for the week a list, but then really specifically every night, I, make my list for the next day. And then I put down my top three things that are critical for me to do from a business perspective, and then also from a personal, mental health, physical
Mhm.
health perspective, and spiritual for that matter perspective. So that, if I get nothing else done that day, I get those things done. And then I can always move the other items, to the next day. And then at the end of the day, I go through and make sure what I've accomplished, and then, move things around if I need to.
You're speaking my language, because I don't know if you see it behind me, but the entrepreneurs are making God number one planner and journal. That's exactly how we teach people to go through. You got to hit your needle movers, right? The things that are going to
Yeah,
move you the most forward. You got to make those a priority. Too many people just make a to-do list with no order to it. They just take care of
right.
the things that are easy first, and
Yeah.
never get to the hard things.
Yeah,
And it's
and then
often
then
the
you're reacting a throughout the day. So I try to get a lot of those critical things done, in the morning and at least before noon, because things start stacking up during the day. You start responding to emails, or if you have clients, then you're dealing with that as well.
Yeah, not to mention energy. Like it's
Yeah,
not just time management, it's manage your energy. You have most energy at the beginning of the day, right? And if
right.
you wait till the end of the day to try and take care of these critical things, you're doing so with less energy.
Yeah,
So
that's why I start my day, every one of my days at 6 a.m.
nice, nice. All right, so this is kind of a little bit of shameless plug for me, but I like to ask this for all my guests. I have this book. I don't know if you can see it. I have Dear Younger Me, I Wish You Knew, 15 Powerful Letters That Will Change Your Life, that just recently came out. So I'm asking all my podcast guests, if you could go back and tell your younger self something, what age would you be as your younger self, and what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think I'd be like in the around 10 years old, and I would tell myself, don't worry about what people think about you. Obviously in a if you're presuming that something might be negative, or you're not moving forward with something, because of other people saying you can't do it, and so forth. And of course, I'm going to listen to positive messages,
Mhm.
and then try to learn from that. And I've done that. Always remained a student my whole life of that. But I think that's one of many things I probably tell myself, but that's one of the key ones, because that really gets in the way if you allow other people to define you, number one, and number two, if it discourages you from really going after your dreams and your aspirations.
Yes, yes. And I think that's a really good age right before you get into those teenage years when you're super influenced, being able to be influenced and things like that, letting yourself know that not to put too much weight on what others think. So,
Right.
and unless it's really positive,
Yeah.
take the positive affirmations all day, right?
Right.
Um, so I do this with all my guests as well. It's called fill in the blank, and it's around entrepreneurship. Your fill in the blank question is success in entrepreneurship hinges not only on blank, it's also about blank. So two.
I would say I would fill that in with working hard is working smart.
Mm, yes.
You still are working hard, but you're working smart.
Yes. I that's a common trap for entrepreneurs. They think they're accomplishing a lot, but they're working hard. And if they work smarter, they'd get a little bit further. So
Right.
yeah, that's a great one.
And that's something for
Oh,
entrepreneurs too, is good to help with their work-life balance, because if they're doing everything and wearing all the hats, they're not having the quality of life, or in enjoying themselves or their business.
and 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 here's a plug. If you're doing your own sales, you might not necessarily be working smart. You might need to hire someone like James Watson to help come in and build your sales infrastructure for you.
Yeah,
So
yeah, particularly in the technology space, where you got a lot of super smart people. You got MIT grads. They've got unique products or services. They'll oftentimes have patents, and they try to do everything themselves. And particularly now, I think I just had a conversation with someone about that yesterday. One of the trappings that people are really falling into is to try to DIY everything and then use AI, and think that they can do it all on their own. And a lot of times, these very smart tech people, they think that they can kind of beat the system or do it differently. And some realize it early on enough, but others have to fall down or fail. And there's actually a very high rate of businesses that fail, and only a small percentage actually make it to ever to make it to an IPO, or getting acquired, or to the success level that they want.
yeah, yeah. All right, now to really what I call the heart of the interview. Entrepreneurs can learn so much from the stories of others, what they've been through, and how they got to where they are. So I'd like to open this time for you to tell your story. Just give us the whatever you want to tell us, the cliff notes, like just kind of
Mhm.
start wherever you want to start and kind of tell us your story.
Yeah, well, that's a good one, because about a year ago, I met someone through Provisors, and I was a professional storyteller, and I decided to hire him. Even
Mm,
though my pitches were good, my processes were good, I wanted to have something, get a fresh set of eyes and ears on, my in profile, on my why story, on my 10, 30, 60-second pitches, on my PowerPoint decks, all that. So I worked with that individual on that, and that really, and in creating my why story, which then became my about on LinkedIn. He took me back to my childhood, and I was fortunate enough to have two great parents, and have be blessed with a lot of I guess privilege, in the sense that they always gave me everything I wanted. They never spoiled me, but they always gave me everything I want. And when I was younger, I was kind of naturally shy, not around family, but meeting new people or new family members that I didn't know. And my parents recognized that. And so that's when they got me into sports, which is why I ended up playing, so many sports. And I had a little bit of a setback that was disappointing in my junior year in high school. I was a quarterback competing for the varsity position, and they wanted me to get more experience because the other guy had already been up there since his sophomore year, and he had taken them to the North Coast, finals. So it was a very competitive situation. Well, when I moved down to JV for that year, I had a breakout year. And then, my next year in varsity, I ended up replacing that starting quarterback, and had, and we ended up beating, for our last season, we beat our undefeated cross team rivals that were going to, to a championship game. And so that was very gratifying. And what that really taught me, is, dealing with adversity and embracing it. And, I can honestly say I've learned more from my mistakes and my setbacks than I have from my successes. It's easy to be successful. It's hard to deal with adversity. And so, looking back now, that I started unknowingly when I got into sales and sales leadership, bringing that really to the table, and um, focusing on that with myself and my reps. And now I'm very cognizant of it. And that's again why, working with people that are in early stage, or even, whatever they are in that $1 to $50 million range, but they need to have help on the sales side, that ends up being very gratifying. And I know how to deal with it because they're all going through setbacks, they're all going through challenges. And so one of the questions I love to ask is, what keeps you up at night? What are your biggest issues? And then, focusing on that, and then things that I've uncovered during assessments.
Yeah. Wow. Nice. Nice. Now I want to get into your expertise a little bit. We have a segment that we call Entrepreneur Secrets. So, what is the secret? This might be too big. What is the secret to setting up a proper sales infrastructure?
Yeah, so setting up a proper sales infrastructure requires knowing what your client or team, if you have a team, needs if you're working, as a direct sales manager. But from a fractional VP of sales perspective, it means going in and doing deep dive discovery, doing assessments, and then more assessments, during the first few weeks or month, and then coming up with a custom sales playbook that that starts. It really does go A to Z, and it starts with doing research up front on your clients or prospects, to make sure you're identifying the right opportunities and going after those, and then prospecting, working on pitches to get those down, handling the objections that inevitably come, and then when you get your first meeting, creating qualifying form or qualifying forms with questions that you're going to be asking. And the goal of that is to come up with 3 value propositions at the end, not for yourself. You got to know your own value prop, but for the client. And then when you get your next meeting to do a presentation, and maybe the final meeting, or maybe one of final meetings, you're building your PowerPoint, which you already have a framework for, template, but you're customizing it to them, and then reviewing those key value props for them, and finding if there are new people in the room, you got to find out, does anyone else have anything to add, but then building your presentation around that, and then reviewing that again at the end, because now you're and then asking a lot of open-ended questions. When someone focuses on something, or says something that is important to them, a lot of people just gloss over it and then go on with their presentation. Sometimes that one key issue is critical, and then asking, and this is a Sandler technique, taking people into the pain funnel, is asking second and third level questions. How has that impacted you? Tell me more about that. Because now they're starting to own their own problems. And then later on, you can review that at the end if you're dealing with objections about this or that. You can kind of use their own words and bring that in and help move the process forward. From that point on, once then go into the close, which I don't like to look at the close as an event. It's really more of a process and a logical transition into the next step. But you will oftentimes face different objections. So then objection there becomes important. And then closing the deal, obviously. And then the next critical stage is onboarding, and making sure you've got like a 2-3 week process where you're very active in making sure that they're getting everything they are and getting acclimated to the new product or service, and then maintaining a routine ongoing for that client, like I mentioned before, so that you're building up trust. They know you, they like you, they trust you, and then being able to get referrals, being able to get upsells, and so forth. And of course, keeping them as a client. You want to have your, especially in a SaaS model, everything is about annual recurring revenue, and it's not recurring if it doesn't renew.
That's true. So two key things that I wanted to ask you, kind of dive further in. One thing you mentioned is qualifying, making sure you have the part of sale. One of the best parts of sales is making sure you have the right people on the call, right? Before it even gets to a call. Like a lot of salespeople have calls with a lot of unqualified leads because they're not doing the qualifying process properly. So I love that you touched on that. Do you want to talk about that anymore?
Yeah. So, when I worked, in corporate for a larger company, or went from 100 million, ended up being at 2 billion, they were just going public. And, there at certain times, one time I ran a team of 22 people, including sales managers, and there were about 4 different disciplines. And then we had a lot of verticals that we dealt with. So we built like 10 different qualifying forms. So it's important to know who your audience is, and then build a qualifying form. There's certain questions that you're always going to ask. Who needs to be involved? What's your decision-making process? What's your budget? Are there, does this have to go to a board? All those different things. But then, making it specific questions to what that target audience is going to be and what's going to be important, so that you can really come up with those 3 value props, which is always the end game of any qualifying, so that you can then prepare for that next meeting and presentation. And then to your point, making sure that you're getting all the right people into the room. And sometimes, I've had this happen as a rep and as a manager. You'll have the CEO pop into the meeting, or the leader pop into the meeting for just a minute or two. And I've seen, I did it initially too, but some people just keep going on with their presentation. When that person walks in, or people, I always ask, if they say, "Hey, what's going on here?" That'll be a typical question. And then, I'll ask them, "How much time do you have here? How long are you going to stay?" Because I'm then going right to my elevator pitch and then saying, "Hey, I'm recording this session, or I'm happy to send you the deck afterwards." But, asking them some poignant questions, and then making sure that they walk out of there, curious at least.
Yeah, yeah. On the other end of that is retention, right? Or part of sales is making sure, especially from a software standpoint, software as a service, it's not getting the charge back, right? Keeping the sale after you've made it. So I love the point that you made about the onboarding and making sure that that is done right. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the onboarding needs to be done right. And one of the things we did, or that I implemented when I was running some larger teams, is that they would have to, right after they got the contract signed. First of all, that's a good time to ask for a referral. A lot of people don't do that, because you got people at their highest point when they're signing an agreement. Is there anyone else you can think of that might benefit from my services? That's important. And then, maybe having, actually we created a form, so that when they signed the agreement, the form actually included an onboarding process and set dates, which we would set with them for doing the initial meeting, and then doing a meeting another week later, and then maybe 2 weeks later, and then 4 weeks later, and then going to a quarterly routine. So they really know what's to be expected. And we would even talk about that when we were going through the sales process, because we wanted to let them know we're not just hit and run. We're not just going to leave you hanging there. You're important. You're going to come on as a client. You're going to be one of the most important things to our business. And, in that company, our CEO did analysis once, and 70%, it was, once a company is, established, 70% of our business was coming from either directly or indirectly from existing clients, either upsells, cross sells, referrals, or people leaving and then, essentially being evangelists for your product or service, and you're the first person they talk to, or let them know. I had people that I built good relationships up with that were leaving their company that told me, but that I knew that before, their boss did, and they were saying, "Hey, there's two things I need. I'm going to need an office space," which now, this was pre-COVID, which now, most
Yeah.
people have gone remote, but I need office space, and I need to have access to your services so that I'm on a level playing field and have the same resources I did when I was at this big company. And so those are some of the things, that I cover there.
Nice. So let's talk about, I want to circle back to startups and um small SMBs. So if you could talk about, so what are any key principles or strategies that you employ when working with startups or small SMBs?
Yeah, so it'll vary a little bit. We typically will start, with the earlier stage startup. If I don't think they're wasting my time, I'll have a special program, that I put together for, just for startups, which is kind of an early stage. But then for, the companies that are more established, even if they're startups and they've got maybe a first, second round of funding, and they're, doing 500-600K and ARR, we'll take them into what we call a phase one infrastructure plan. And usually we'll do that before phase two. Sometimes we'll jump to a phase two if it's a really, advanced company. And that's where we're full outsourced VP of sales. And the difference is, in the sales infrastructure stage, we're evaluating everything they're doing a lot of assessments, coming up with that sales playbook with processes, making sure they got the right people in the right seat, train the people that need to be trained if it's just an issue that they've got the will but maybe not the skill yet, and then bringing on onboarding new people, and then going through all those processes I explained during that kind of phase one infrastructure plan, and taking it on, doing executive meetings weekly. Then, if a lot of times people will renew us, and I just finished with a client not so long ago that renewed me on into the outsourced VP of sales. Essentially, I doubled my hours and then got even more into the weeds, because now they had the infrastructure. I helped them hire someone. I helped onboard them, and they already had a rep. I helped effectively reboard them, because I made them go through the same, training and certification with the sales playbook as I did the new person. And then they renewed me on, for another 6 months. So it ended up being, or 7 months, it ended up being a year-long, engagement. And there again, I'm getting even more hands-on, doubling my hours. Obviously, the fees go up, but I'm, able then to work on a very strategic level with them, because they've now got the processes in place. And again, I'm unlike some of my peers, like I said before, I like to stay hands-on. A lot of them will not get on calls or sales calls, or talk to clients. I think that's all important, and I enjoy doing it.
Nice, nice. One quick question as a kind of a follow-up to that. So in your what you offer, do you train their existing sales reps and help them recruit new sales reps, or what do you do around that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, in that one scenario, the company I worked with for a year, they had a senior sales rep in place, and they had hired him. This is another mistake that a lot of companies make. They just try to hire a Rolodex. They take someone from a big company. They're not a big company. They don't have a brand name yet. They haven't done all that. They're not established, and they try to hire someone because of the clients they had and the Rolodex they have. Well, I've found that, and they find eventually that runs out very quickly, and oftentimes they're not going to be able to move those clients that they had before over to a new startup when they don't trust that yet. And so it's very important, and if there's a person like that in place, to work with them along with helping to hire a new person and then really onboarding all of them. I treat that senior rep, and I get the endorsement, of course, of the CEO to make sure that that rep knows that they need to go through this. And then I involve them in a final certification, and even the existing reps have to do it, where they've got to do what I call a presentation interview, where they do a scenario. It's a mock scenario, but I tell them so they're not wasting their time to do it on a real prospect. And then they have to do the research, go through what research they did, go through a mock call to get the meeting. I give them a couple objections. CEOs listening to this, by the way, listening in on this, and then have them go through the whole process on through the close, and then the onboarding process as well.
Wow. Wow. That's intensive. I like it. In your experience, how crucial is the ability to being able to adapt in sales?
It's critical. Not only when things are going well and the market's good, and when you're doing well, you're going to have new technologies, new competitors, different challenges that your clients are facing. And it's important to be able to adapt to that, because there are going to be competitors that will, come in and say certain things, and you need to be aware of what new technologies are out of there, what competitors, what's changing in the marketplace, and adapt to that. And then in a down market like this, I believe it's really critical to be able to adapt, if not more critical, because a lot of people's revenue is going down. And one of the things that a CEO said to me not so long ago is, James, in a market like this, you've got to work twice as hard to get half the results. And again, that goes back to what I was talking about before, with not taking your foot off the pedal. And a lot of times people, their revenue goes down. They're, oh, we'll ride this out. We'll ride this out. Well, you don't want to be the person or the company that's riding it out. You want to be the one that's positioning yourself for when things get better, and, working twice as hard and smart to get results now, even though you're going to have to work that much harder.
Yeah, I always seen the difference in companies that keep the investment into their sales and marketing versus the ones that don't in down markets. And it's usually the ones that keep the investment in their sales and marketing going that come out stronger on the other side. So
yeah. And on that note, if you're looking at the cycle there from a startup company to kind of a mid-level company that's already doing well, but maybe they've run into a wall, which a lot of them do when their unique product or service and the CEO's shine wears off because he or she are doing all the sales. They'll need help to go to that next level. The startups obviously need help, but how we're handling those are different. But then the other one that I've started working with, and I've started going to their events and attending, in person and on Zoom, is EPI, the Exit Planning Institute. And a lot of CEOs, for example, this is one thing I learned, from that, especially in California, where you've got really high capital gains taxes if someone sells their company. And they would have to establish themselves for 6 months elsewhere if they're going to try to play that game to avoid the taxes. But when the exit planners are doing their valuations, and a lot of the companies, they overvalue where they think their company, what their company is worth. And a lot of times, that they've got work to do, and that exit process can be up to 2 years. And they're working closely with attorneys and exit planners there. But I've kind of inserted myself and gotten interest from the exit planners to potentially bring me in, because not only do they need to make sure, that the CEO is not too important, because someone buying the company doesn't want that person to be the only thing that, is the face of the company and all important, because that person may end up leaving. And so they want to make sure that they've got a solid infrastructure and a solid group of people that are going to stay with the company. And then also another thing, which obviously is going to help out, their value of the company, is to have more sales. And then another thing that I look at, which a lot of the exit planners look at, or all of them look at, is the client concentration of revenue. Because if you've got, 70, 80% of your revenue coming from one client, that's a big red flag for anyone acquiring that company. And it's also not good for the business, because what if that client goes away, or what if they scale down? So really no more than 10 to 20% of their client base, ideally, revenue should be coming from one client.
Yeah, it's just like personal. You kind of want diversified investments, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, that's awesome. So you also mentioned the weekly executive meetings in your collaborative process. Can you talk a little bit more about those and why those are so important?
Yeah, those are important. I typically do, the Monday morning meetings has always been the motion to start the day for the sales reps. And then doing kind of a debrief with the, whoever's on the executive team at the end of the week to review, what we had in the timeline and the deliverables for that week. And I do break it out week by week, reviewing that, seeing what, going through what we went through, what we accomplished, what challenges might have been, and then being able to pivot back to your point and adapt, because it becomes a work in progress then as time goes by. And I end up working on things that with the reps that weren't necessarily planned, because the leader or leaders all of a sudden say, hey, well, what about this? Or we would also use help with this. And then they want to focus on that. And so that's where it's important also to adapt to that. And then going through, what are we going to be doing next week? And, besides just looking in the review, what was accomplished, but what are we going to be doing next week? And, what possibly needs to be added, and then repeating that motion, every week for the initial, 3 to 4 months of the sales infrastructure agreement.
Nice. Wow, this has been so informative. There's some things that I like to think I know a little bit about sales, but there's so much that you brought to my attention that I wasn't even aware of as far as the whole sales infrastructure. So I greatly appreciate it. I know the audience has learned a lot as well. So thank you so much, James. I know, where will someone find out more about how to contact you if they're looking to install a sales infrastructure? Can you talk a little bit more again about what you do and how people can find out more about you?
Yeah. So again, James Watson, fractional VP of sales. My company is Sales Catapult. And again, companies that small to mid-sized businesses and, well-funded startups that work with me scale their sales and profits with my hands-on approach to sales processes and sales management. And so, that really makes a difference. And the way people can get a hold of me is through email at jwatson at sales acceleration, spelled salesaceleration.com. Or my phone number, if someone wants to call me or text me, is 310-488-1864. And also, if anyone, wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm big on LinkedIn. I, work a lot in there. And I find it's a very important avenue for all business. You can easily look me up, James Watson Sales Catapult, within LinkedIn, or you can Google me at James Watson Sales Catapult, and I come up pretty high if you want to get to me that way.
All right, awesome. Well, all those links, the email address, all of that stuff we're going to put in the show notes, as well as if you see this as a post or a description, you'll find it in the information accompanying this video or this audio podcast. So be sure to reach out to James. I think we mentioned it near the top. Sales is the lifeblood of business, right? Without it, nothing else happens. If you're not making sales, you're not making anything. So what the service and just the level that James provides that service is incredible. So I implore anyone that is in need of that service, please reach out to James. I ask one last question of all the entrepreneurs that come on this podcast, and that is basically, it's a free form. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for entrepreneurs out there?
um, Yeah, I mean, it would kind of go back to the working hard versus working hard and smart. I think that's critical. And then I think taking a look, or I know taking a look at all the different channels of your business. Sometimes when I ask someone what's keeping them up at night or what's important, I'll end up referring them to a networking partner or to a VC, or an accelerator that can help out with their funding, because I know that they might need me down the line, but that's not a fit right now. But taking a look at all of those different avenues, and then really taking a hard look at sales and where, if you're doing it yourself, is that your time best spent? I've had CEOs go through their wonderful sales process, and then if I know them well enough, I'll jokingly say, well, you've become a wonderful salesperson when you want to be the CEO. And so I think being aware of that, and when you need to shift from proof of concept and doing it yourself, which investors are going to expect. They're going to want the leaders to show that they can sell this product or service. But knowing, maybe getting help with that early on, which I can do, but then definitely after you hit a certain point, it's time to hire that first critical business development rep. And that's something that we can help with, my organization can help with. Or if they want to DIY that and they've got a great connection base, then I can get involved with, and I've done this before also, with just the finals, like 3 candidates, and then interviewing them. And I have a lot of experience in interviewing and getting down behind the resume and asking a lot of those open-ended second, third level questions about their performance, what their typical week looks like. And so that first hire becomes very important, along with building the sales infrastructure. So those would be my parting words.
Wow. I feel like I could have a second interview, because just based on what you said, I had some more questions arise, but I'm not going to do that. This interview has been very informative as it is. So thank you again, James. And until next time, entrepreneurs, keep moving forward.
Thanks a lot, Dan.